Hello and welcome to the QA Financial Podcast. I'm Mikael Willems and today we're looking at how artificial intelligence is changing digital accessibility and what that means for banks and other financial institutions as they design, build and test customer-facing services. Today I'm joined by Randall, Executive Creative Director at Level Access, a specialist in end-to-end digital accessibility. Dana will lead a 3-hour workshop, AI for Accessibility and Cutting-Edge UX, in London next month on September the 15th. And the interactive session will explore how teams can use AI to create more accessible digital experiences while avoiding the new risks introduced by AI-generated designs and code. Dana, thank you so much and welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, as I just said, banks are rapidly adopting AI-generated designs and code. So what would you say, what new accessibility risks does this introduce and how can quality engineering teams prevent those risks from reaching customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I use AI every day, multiple times a day in my work. And I think it's important to understand that where the risk for accessibility comes into play is that AI is trained off of what we have done, the websites and the apps that we have built over the years. And over 95 of websites and apps have accessibility issues in them. So the reason that this matters is that because AI has been trained off of essentially a system with a lot of errors in it, it's going to replicate those errors. And so the work that we're going to do during our workshop is to understand how to intercept those errors, prevent those errors, and test for those errors.
Gotcha. Interestingly, accessibility has traditionally been treated as a compliance check near the end of development. So how can AI help financial institutions to embed it much earlier in the design, in the development, and basically in the testing lifecycle?
Yes, absolutely. So as a creative director and designer, the time that I get involved in product development or software development is at the beginning. And that is the prime opportunity to start thinking about accessibility. And you're right, historically, it has been very compliance driven and often it's being addressed at the end of the product development life cycle. However, there is so many opportunities as early as the project brief to start thinking about accessibility. And then, of course, whether you are doing this work manually, human-powered, or using AI, there are opportunities throughout the entire process. It's really important to understand that whether you're creating something manually or using AI, in either circumstance, you have an opportunity to consider accessibility as early as the project brief. And I fundamentally believe that the earlier accessibility is considered, the more seamless and more elegant the end product is. It becomes pretty obvious, especially to me as a designer. I can always spot when someone retrofitted accessibility at the last stage of product development. But when it is considered early, it should be almost invisible to the average user. And to me, that's the real goal and the true win.
Okay, great. Well, let's focus on regulation. On this side of the pond, you have the European Accessibility Act, which is now applied for more than a year. So how would you say, how has it changed what banks are expected to demonstrate when designing and testing their digital services?
Absolutely. So in North America, where I'm based, accessibility has been part of our legal landscape for a while. But last year, when the European Accessibility Act was introduced, it started to hold businesses, regardless of where you are based. If you are operating within the EU, you are expected to have an accessible product. So in brick and mortar, if you had a banking financial services institution, you are expected to have, if you have steps that have to enter your business, you are expected to have a ramp or some way for someone in a mobility device to be able to enter your business. And the same holds true now for all digital experiences. And when you're talking about essential services, things like banking, financial, travel, healthcare, those are the types of businesses that are being held to these high standards. I'm not saying that if you're a local pizzeria that you shouldn't also be accessible, but as far as something that is now being government mandated, it's incredibly important, especially for services that are essential services. And I don't think there's anything more essential than in the finance industry.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And obviously, there's that other piece of legislation that came out of the EU, DORA, which focuses on keeping financial services operational and resilient, while the European Accessibility Act requires many digital services to be accessible. So, what would you say, should banks treat accessibility as part of operational resilience, ensuring that services are not only available but usable by every customer? I mean, how do you see that?
Yeah, so DORA doesn't actually specifically mention accessibility, but it does mention process and accountability. And the good news is that anything that an organization is doing to comply with DORA sets a fantastic framework and foundation for accessibility. The work that we do at Level Access is not just about the tools and the process, but also the governance. And that is where you have the intersection of the European Accessibility Act and DORA. And so with the European Accessibility Act, it is explicit around accessibility and digital accessibility. DORA is explicit about process and documentation. And so when you combine those two, you're actually creating the perfect environment to build a sustainable and scalable accessibility program.
Right, gotcha. And then if we move on to automated tools, I mean, they can identify many accessibility defects, but they cannot fully judge whether an experience is intuitive or generally inclusive. Where should financial institutions draw the line, really, between AI-assisted testing, conventional automated checks, and let's say, human validation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I mentioned, I use AI every day. I build functional prototypes using AI, and AI can do some accessibility testing. However, we also know that AI is not always truthful. Some people refer to it as hallucinating. And so to kind of answer where do you draw the line, I am a huge believer in let AI do its part and let it try, but don't always trust that it's going to deliver what it's saying it's doing. So that's where we shift from you get as far as you can with AI, and we'll work on that together in the workshop around different markdown files and prompts and what should be in your brief in order to set AI up for as much success as possible. But what I like to say is that essentially AI is the floor, not the ceiling. It's a great starting point, but it is really important, as you mentioned, the actual user journey, the actual customer experience does require that you validate what AI is saying passes or doesn't pass. Or AI may say, oh, yes, of course, I built this with accessibility in mind. But what I find in the work that I do every day is sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. And I do believe that it actually is going to get better and improve over time, just in general. That's what's happening with AI. But in today's environment, I think we're creating a really good and scalable formula if we understand what do we need to provide AI with in order to do its best possible job, and then when does human intervention need to come in to check its work, validate that it's delivering on what it's saying it's doing, and then whether it's a human fixing it or possibly AI fixing it, those are
Right. Yeah, I see what you mean. If we move on to your workshop next month in London, during their workshop, participants will produce a design brief and build an accessible prototype application. So, what will this practical exercise teach them that they wouldn't necessarily learn from a conventional presentation?
For sure. So if you're going to attend the workshop, you should come with your laptop. It's going to be interactive. It's going to be hands-on. You are not going to be listening to me lecture for 3 hours. So what are we going to do in the workshop? So we're going to start with, as I mentioned, we're going to use AI to build a prototype. Now, this is an inclusive workshop. It doesn't matter. You don't need to have design capabilities. You don't need to know how to code. As long as you can give something instructions, you can participate in the workshop. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on a journey together. We are going to start with a brief, and then we're going to have AI build a prototype for us. We're going to get hands-on and we're going to do a little bit of testing of that prototype and understand what did it do well, what didn't it do well. And the thing that's going to keep it interesting is everyone's going to be prototyping together in their own instance. And what we'll also notice is the great amount of variation of the outcome of the same tool with the same prompt. And so what we're going to do is as we move through the day, we're going to start for, let's say, good, better, and best. And we're going to start with bad, because I think it's important to understand what bad looks like in order to be able to recognize what good looks like. So we're going to start with no accessibility guidance whatsoever. And then we're going to test. And then we're going to continue to improve. We're going to give that AI a bit more of a foundation to build off of. And then we're going to continue to evolve throughout the day. And then at the sort of, we'll call like a 3-round process. In round 3, we're going to also introduce professional tools like what Level Access offers. Now, that will be a little bit more demonstration based because not everyone in the room will have access to the Level Access tools and services, but you're going to get hands-on with understanding what makes a good brief, understanding what type of guidelines and markdown you can connect your AI tools with in order for it to do a better job. We're going to get hands-on with a little bit of QA and testing to understand, for example, if you're using a keyboard, how do things work? And then finally, we're going to elevate throughout the day. So at the end of the workshop, I am very confident that you're not going to be an accessibility expert, and that's not the goal. But I feel that you're going to be comfortable with understanding what digital accessibility means. You're going to be confident in how to use AI and how to connect accessibility best practices into that. You're going to get a little bit of confidence with some testing and things like technology that you use every day. So we're not going to have you testing using a screen reader if you're not a screen reader user, but we are going to have you use technology that you use every day, like your keyboard. So what happens when you navigate a prototype without using a mouse or a trackpad? And that's just a taste of what we're going to do in the workshop together.
Sounds very exciting. And it actually brings me to my next question, which you, I guess, partly answered already. But so after the workshop, what do you think, what would meaningful progress look like? Like what practical changes should quality engineering leaders be able to take back and implement within their respective organizations?
Well, you will be able to understand what everyone's role is in the product development life cycle. So it'll be much more clear if you're a product manager. Essentially, you're the person that's creating the brief. What are those things that should be included in your brief? If you're a designer, what are some of the accessibility considerations that need to be within your framework of the work that you do every day? And then again, if you're an engineer, understanding how do you connect some of the AI authoring tools that you're using to systems in order to have a more accessible outcome. And of course, if you're an accessibility champion or you are interested in becoming an accessibility champion, you're going to be set up for success on the role that you can play potentially in your organization going forward to help champion accessibility, regardless of whether you're a product manager, a designer, an engineer, a QA professional, all roles.
So finally, you already partly answered my question, but in a nutshell, who is this workshop for, would you say? And what will participants really get out of the 3-hour session? What it comes down to is why should they attend this workshop in London next month?
Well, as a practitioner of inclusive design, it was really important for me to make sure this workshop was inclusive. And so it doesn't matter what your day-to-day role is within your organization. I highly encourage you to participate. All are welcome. I don't want anyone to feel intimidated. The only skill set that you need to have is the ability to provide instructions. And I think that most people will be able to feel confident in their ability to do that. Yeah. And so I really feel that this workshop is designed to be role agnostic. And I really believe that people learn best by doing. So it was designed to be hands on. I'm going to be walking around the room. People, if they're feeling brave, are going to share their work with the group. And so it's going to be very interactive, very hands on, hopefully a little bit entertaining. I want to have a little bit of fun. I know this topic can feel a little bit of dry at times. So I am also personally motivated to make sure that you have a good time and that you leave the workshop feeling confident. You've got some tools, you've got some free tools that will be available to you. You've got understanding of what level access does and the tools that are available if you are a level access customer or potentially become a level access customer. But this is not a 3-hour sales pitch either. So I want to be very clear on that. It's going to be hands-on, it's going to be interactive, and we're going to build prototypes together.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add or you'd like to share? Anything that you feel like, hey, we haven't really touched on that yet?
Well, what I'll share is a little bit about myself, because I think it's important to understand why am I hosting this workshop, and what I would share is that I'm actually disabled. And so I think that's an important distinction, because I recognize that someone's first impression of me would not be a person with disabilities. And that's also why I do the work that I do. I live with non-apparent disabilities. And that means that as when you're in some type of consumer customer service job, you don't necessarily know who is disabled and who is not. And I definitely represent that demographic. And so I think it's important to understand how broad this work goes. The trillions of dollars of spending power globally that the disability community has, and whether it's your customers that you're going to be creating financial applications for, or their immediate orbit, their family, their friends, their colleagues, their coworkers. So I think that's the thing that I would add is this work is really important. It has a tremendous impact on a community that has a huge amount of spending power, and it is much broader than you probably recognize. And I will also promise you that this will not be intimidating. Don't feel nervous. It doesn't matter if you know nothing about accessibility. I want you to feel confident and comfortable that this is going to be a safe space where we're going to learn together.
Well, thank you, Dana. Thank you very much for joining us. That was Dana Randall, Executive Creative Director at Level Access, and she will lead the workshop next month in London on the 15th of September. The 3-hour interactive session will give accessibility and quality engineering professionals really an opportunity to explore the practical use of AI, develop a design brief, and build an accessible prototype application. Further details you can find on her website, also how to register and what you can expect. So thanks again for listening to the QA Financial Podcast. And thanks again, Dana, for joining us. We'll see you soon in London.
I'll see you in London.